all the problems that we face in the producer world. I think one of the biggest ones asserting our intellectual property rights.
At the very least, we need a better way to say, okay, who are the rights holders? And, I don't know what your experience has been, but it's a bunch of DocuSigns. It's a bunch of chasing people around. It's trying to get everybody's, different BMI numbers and all that. It's just a pain.
Peace, everybody who's tuning in. What's going on? It's the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast. Not only do we have a full house, although Erin is traveling, as is her wont to do, as we know, Dame and I are not traveling, which is how we maintain our own respective forms of mediocrity. But we do have a special guest. In addition to that, we have Brandon Tory from Formless. He's an artist as well. And we're going to talk politics. No, I'm just playing. How are you feeling, man? We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. Excited.
And might I add, like he's a really dope artist too. Like I don't typically expect it from cats that are doing the type of things that he's doing. Like it's sometimes very corny. Like the music, I don't have high expectations for the music. But when I listened to the music the first time, I was like, oh shit, this cat could really go.
Well, I was gonna say that was gonna be my first question, because you were signed at one point. I don't know what the status of that is, but could you just give a quick synopsis of how that music career came and then transitioned into what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up outside of Boston in Brockton, Massachusetts. And, from a very young age, wanted to get into tech, wanted to be a hacker, but like kind of grew up in a rough neighborhood. I actually lived in a shelter when I was 15. And so hip hop was always a language to kind of communicate and understand, other kids from around the way. So I had this dichotomy, like, is it tech? Is it music? Is it culture? Is it hip hop? That was always my story. Ended up becoming an engineer and then quit to go full time into music. So moved to Atlanta in 2011. That's when I really got my start, linked up with a lot of dope songwriters, producers, learned everything really in Atlanta from the years that I was there. Moved to LA and got my first big break because I made this guitar song called Comfortable, and Timbaland heard it and discovered me. So I fly to Miami, I meet Tim, and he's like, I hope you're ready because like it's gonna go up from here, right? I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm a little bit jaded from music at the time. I get back to LA, he's calling me every day. Where's the next record? Where's the next record? So I made this mixtape called Shine that was really off that kind of energy, you know what I'm saying? Him pushing me and inspiring me. So that was my start. That was when I was in LA. And then, I had songs with 1 million streams, a couple songs, that was up there on Spotify, but wasn't making no bread off of that. I think we all know as an independent artist, unless you have, millions of monthlies, it's not really sustainable. So I had to figure out how do I blend music and tech and kind of like be my full identity. And that's where this idea of Formless came. So I'm glad so much on call. It's a scam too. That's where this idea of being formless came from. It was like, especially in our culture, we have these images and these specific labels about what we're trying to achieve. And for me, it was like, how do we break out of that, kind of form new identity structures? And that's where the word formless came from. And so joined Apple as a senior engineer, worked there for multiple years on all the releases of iOS. Joined Google as a staff engineer, working on artificial intelligence, and was making music at the same time in parallel. And so got a lot of coverage in like Forbes and the Journal and other places that was like really thinking about the story. Homeless kid comes from the neighborhood making music, but now he's at Google. It was kind of a dope thing. And then I linked up with Dallas Austin. He saw my project Unicorn, where I had done I had this video where I had a floating Tesla in the background. He saw it on the gram. I was like, okay, I got to hit this guy up, right? So he hits me. We ended up doing a deal. So that was the first deal that I signed. It was a distribution deal with Dallas Austin, and we've been homies ever since. And so that's what I put out, Unicorn, under DAD. That's Dallas Austin Distribution. And left Google top of this year to go full-time into Web3 and blockchain. And so Formless is my tech company, and we're building a protocol to essentially flip the industry upside down and kind of change the way that stuff is monetized, the way that royalties work, and the way the creator can control their future.
Well, a couple of questions. Do you have formal training as an engineer, or did you just pick this up YouTube University? What's the formal training from an engineering standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I started coding before YouTube was even a thing. I was like, I was the kid that was dumpster diving, trying to find parts. I had the black screen with the green text. I had the Linux Mandrake. I bought my first chip from a Radio Shack magazine. It was an AMD processor. I put it in there. So I learned everything when I was a teenager from trying to be a hacker and from reverse engineering things. I did go to school for electrical engineering where I got my formal training. Then I worked on embedded systems at a defense company, which was called Teradyne. And that's where I got really, really good because there was a lot of MIT guys, a lot of really senior engineers. And so I always had a good foundation. So when I decided to get back into tech and join Apple, it was very natural to me. I've been doing tech since I was really young.
Got you. And obviously we're going to dive into like Web3 stuff. And I think a lot of the conversations around Web3 like go over a lot of people's heads. And maybe I'll speak for myself. Like sometimes so obviously you're very smart, but I want to try to keep this conversation at a level like where people can really understand exactly what you're doing. Like, what is the problem? Like, what did you identify as the problem? Yeah. And like, how is Formless the solution? You know?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That's been the hardest part by far, is like trying to translate between multiple worlds and make it make sense, right? So I think for me, the best way is to use story, right? I think my story as an independent artist, from what I've seen with a lot of my friends, it represents a lot of people's stories in terms of this lifetime as an artist, right? You get popping, you get recognized, you got a couple million streams, and then you hit this point where it's like, all right, cool, but I have to make enough money to reinvest and to grow and to sustain. And so those numbers are dope, but it's not really enough, right? So what happens is you go out and you get another job. And then when you get that other job, you start to not invest as much into music and it becomes harder to grow. And so I think that that's a very common thing. And it's because of this commoditized distribution system that we have now with royalties and everything else. And so it really comes down to bread, right? Like if it costs me, $10,000 in production and then music video and then PR to like make something and get it popping, but I only make $3,000 back every time I spend $10,000, that's just a broken business. And for me, that's just how the music industry kind of has worked. So, from a technology standpoint, the question is, why is it that we have no control of the business model, right? And it's because if you look at the history of music, we went from trapping out of the trunk, selling CDs for whatever we want, selling our merch, selling our culture, right? To then we saw piracy and we saw file sharing. We saw, okay, we need a solution to this because now it's getting out of control. So streaming popped up. Streaming was a really good answer to that, right? It solved the piracy problem, but that was like, over 10 years ago. So now it's like, what's the next epoch? What's the next thing to get out of this? And so what streaming has done is taken all that value and commoditized it, right? And I'll assume you guys know what this means, but just for the viewer, like commoditization means you take something that typically has variable value and variable pricing, and you say, no, it's all 1 cent. Every t-shirt is a penny, right? That's what happened to music. And so when you do that, you have no spectrum of like price control. And this is why everybody has to have 1 billion streams to survive as an artist. And, that's kind of just the nature of having a central player like a Spotify or like a YouTube that dictates your value. And so for me, I think for the culture, it's like we have to get back to a point where we actually consider our value to be fundamental. And we have to have a way through technology to say, this is my price. This is what I'm worth. I'm not going to let another company dictate that price or that value on my behalf. Now, we've never had a technology that enabled us to do that other than putting your own song on your own website. So we've seen artists do this now where it's like, okay, cool. My stuff's only available on my website. You got to pay $40 or like Nip did, proud to pay $100, you get my album, which is cool. That was a good first step. Now where Web3 enters is we finally have the technology to say you can set the price, you can set all the controls and terms that you want, but it still shows up in Spotify, in YouTube, in Instagram. That's the fundamental difference. That's the future. So the future is you still can use the apps you love, all the different, things we like to use, social media, streaming, but the pricing and the money flow won't be controlled by the middleman. It'll be controlled on a different layer, and that layer is called blockchain. And so that's the fundamental thing. And what it means is that we'll have supply and demand in music. So if you're a Hove, you could say it's $2 a minute for this freestyle today, tomorrow it'll be free, right? Or you can say, all right, my album's going to be $10, you get access for the whole year. It still shows up in the places you love, right? And so you get this really cool spectrum of both compatibility with the systems that people really like to use and control and transparency of pricing and variable pricing depending on the artist.
So how does that still? So how would it still show up on Spotify? I mean, we're probably diving into areas in which you're probably going to have to use language that might go over people's heads. But how would it still?
Yeah.
How would it still show up on Spotify?
Yeah. So this was the key moment. The key moment for me that was like, okay, I need to quit my job and go all in on this is the NFT standard. So everybody thinks about NFTs as like I'm selling you a token or like a picture or something like that. But that's not really what the importance of it is. The importance of the NFT standard is it's the first time we have something that everybody agrees on. That's the only thing that really matters. So Instagram speaks NFT, Spotify speaks NFT, YouTube speaks NFT. That means if you can make a smart contract that controls your royalties and also make it quote unquote speak NFT, it'll light up in the application and you have control of the access terms. Now, people haven't been thinking of it this way, but over time, you'll gradually start to see what I mean. So like NFTs aren't just tokens. The better way to think of NFT is like HDMI, right? So if you think about what did HDMI do? Well, it means no matter what TV I buy, I know I can plug it into my PS5 because it takes HDMI, right? That's what NFT is going to mean in the future. It's not about the things people are using it for today. It's about the fact that we finally have the cord that plugs in to the stuff that we own and control.
Got it. Yeah, because up until now, like the conversations, around NFTs or the things that like hit the headlines is like, oh, I have an old video that I minted as an NFT and sold it for $100,000. And like that just didn't, I mean, obviously it might have happened for a few people, but that's not something that's going to continue.
Not sustainable. And plus there's a lot of like behind the scenes market making that goes into a lot of those headlines and stuff like that. I never really was bullish on that whole wave. For me, it's not about this. Again, this is just me. It's not about selling NFTs. It's about using the smart contract technology and being able to plug in with this new standard. And that's the thing that I'm really bullish on.
That makes more sense. Aaron, I saw you were about to say something. Sorry.
You're cool. So Formless functions as a distributor of some sorts. Is that essentially like a hub? If you're saying if all these things speak, it's essentially a distributor that also does social and other formats, correct?
Yeah, really good way to think of it. So the only distinction I'll make is that Formless is the name of our company. So we have multiple products and things that we design. And the thing that we're talking about is called Share. So it's called the Share protocol, and it's designed by Formless. And Share is exactly what you said. It's like a distribution layer where smart contracts around our content can live, and they would light up in different applications, and the creator has full control.
And there's nothing that Spotify can do to like not allow the song to. Can't Spotify just say, okay, if they're monetizing it in different ways and we're not getting a piece of this?
They do get a piece. So
they do? Okay.
Yeah, so you need incentives, right? If you don't have the right incentives, then it would never flourish. So the idea is the creator sets the price, but then marketplaces can charge additional fees on top of that price. And so now you have incentive structures where everybody wins. For me, disrupting Spotify isn't so much about saying we need to like delete Spotify. It's about we need to take control of the fundamental price. And then based on that fundamental price, other players should be able to build incentive structures on top of that. So, for example, Formless makes money because we charge a transaction fee, which is very small. You wouldn't even notice it, but that's our incentive. Spotify can charge a marketplace fee. Now, if you're charging $2 for the week for access to your album and Formless takes 10% and Spotify takes 5%, that's inconsequential to the consumer. They wouldn't even notice that, but everybody's mutually incentivized and you still get your $2, which is 1,000x impact compared to what you would get in traditional streaming.
Nice. So obviously where have you seen the pushback, right? Like obviously when somebody brings something that's going to potentially disrupt the music industry in some way, the music industry has a way of pushing back. Like where have you seen pushback? Where have the roadblocks been?
It's mainly understanding. I think a lot of it is, it's about education and making sure everybody's speaking the same language and using the right terms. Because something can feel very threatening unless you're able to explain what it means. But until you get to that key point of understanding, it's like, no, I don't want nothing to do with that because it feels threatening or it feels like something that I may have already seen, but wasn't what, you're describing. So I think that's the biggest thing. But in terms of like the most important thing, I think it's getting artists to understand the mindset of valuing ourselves, because that's pretty scary. Like a lot of artists that you talk to, it's like, I love this idea, and I love this kind of future state that we're talking about. But how do I get there? Because I'm already using a lot of these systems. I don't want to lose the value that I built up on Spotify, and I understand that too. So the question is like, okay, how do we use just basic strategy to blend both worlds? To say, you know what, you can still use Spotify, right? That's still a great tool, but why not do a peer-to-peer blockchain release the day before? Because I bet you can make more money on that one day than you're going to make first week on Spotify based on the commoditized payout rate. So it's really like getting out of the technology, and as you said, speaking the language of artists and just letting people understand what the value proposition is.
Yeah, because I think for us, when we talk to people in the Web3 space, I can speak for myself when I say this, it's always, not always, but it's generally a statement about changing the music business and replacing the current established platforms, the current established paradigms. And I think, all right, well, you need major consumer buy-in. You need the majority of consumers to suddenly switch to an entirely different platform, one that's pretty difficult for the average person. They're just going to opt for what's easy and what's familiar. It sounds like for you, this is more like taking the community that you've built as an artist, setting the first part of the consumer funnel journey at, I guess, the more non-traditional methods of receiving your content, and then those who aren't ready for that, or those who want, to take advantage of the secondary releases, can do so, but you unify that all in one experience.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, for me, the word I like to use is just choice. Like, I think what I've seen in technology, everybody tries to come in and say, okay, here's the solution. We're going to algorithmically do this, or we're going to use this NFT thing or whatever. But it's like, it has to be a conversation with the actual creators, and you have to recognize that everybody's going to do it a different way. So you have to build a technology that actually allows everybody to choose what makes sense for them versus dictation. That's always my problem. It's like, if you're coming in with another technology where you're telling creators, here's how it's going to work, or here's how you're going to do it, I think you've already failed. It has to be a technology that's flexible enough where the entire landscape is going to be dynamic, and every creator is going to do something different. I might charge $100 per listen from my song because that's what I feel like doing. Somebody else might say my stuff's still going to be free. It's going to be on Spotify. That's great. It's got to be a spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah, that's what I think is great about the potential of this, because there are a lot of artists. I'm always the one that reminds people, like, hey, there are artists that are winning with streaming and they're doing quite well. But I think this maybe unlocks the potential for music to be a career for maybe a slightly lower tier of artists in terms of like where they're at, to unlock more value and maybe make more sense for them to leave a job and to make music full time. And then I think of people that are killing it in streaming will also like understand, hey, there's more value to be unlocked here with my community if I do things a different way, or have like that initial period of, this is what it would cost to stream my music right when it comes out, and then it'll go to streaming.
One other point to that is, like, I agree with you. There's a lot of artists killing it on streaming, but why not take it to the next level? Why not make it such that the industry itself becomes even bigger, and the success we see of our artists and the people that we look to as creative leaders can be even bigger than what we've been used to, right? And I think that comes from fundamentally valuing ourselves and letting the technology platforms build around that, versus what we see today is the technology platform sets the rules, and then we have to kind of just adapt to whatever it is they say. And I think that's backwards. My whole thing is not replacing these systems, but inverting them.
Right.
And then the other piece is that now you can get consumer participation, right? If you actually have the technology to say, well, I can instantly pay out thousands of people through smart contract technology, and I can set prices, that means you can do things like, all right, for my 100, top community members on this release, we all going to make money together. Like there's a lot of dope things that we can unlock in the future.
Right. So what is the current timeline for this to be a thing? Like, can I do it now? Are you talking with Spotify? Like, what is the timeline for this, to be available for artists?
Yeah, so it's done. We launched it last week. You can sign up on share.formless.xyz. And pretty much if you have any type of Ethereum or Polygon wallet address, if you're familiar with that, that's how you would get started on the creator side. But if you're a consumer, you don't need to deal with that stuff at all. So on the consumer side, you can get access to anything you want just using Apple Pay or Google Pay, or free, because certain creators might still choose to put stuff out for free. And then if you're a consumer and you want to make money, or you want to do like curation where you say, okay, I'm going to make a playlist with 10 songs and I want to monetize it, then you could use a wallet, in which case you would be able to make money.
That's a game changer. So how do you allow people to sell playlists when they don't own the masters?
Yeah, so that's the dopest thing, right? If an artist says, I'm going to do a release on blockchain, right, they're essentially putting an agreement in electronic code format into the internet that gives people permission to sub-license that through their own contract, as long as they pay the artist what they ask for. So for example, if you put a song out that's 10 cents a day, and then I make a playlist that's 25 cents a day, and I got a bunch of songs in it, as long as you get your 10 cents, then in that smart contract, you're electronically enabling me to use that song in my playlist. And so monetized curation, I think, is where the incentive is for the consumer, because right now we see a lot of people making these dope playlists, but they're not monetizing. And I know for some of these playlists, I mean, that playlist could get me through my entire week or my entire month. Like that might be all I need, and it might be $1. And I think once we get to that, it's questionable about whether or not you need to pay $10 a month or $120 a year on music. I don't think that necessarily is a fundamental truth that's going to last forever.
So it's kind of like going back to the mix CDs days.
Exactly.
Cats slanging them CDs. This is dope. I have a few more questions, but Payne, Aaron, do you want to jump in there?
So I guess it goes back to all my conversations about Web3 and blockchain. And I make beats. I'm a music producer as well, and so all the problems that we face in the producer world, I think one of the biggest ones is just asserting our intellectual property rights, and making sure that we're actually being treated fairly in that regard.
Yeah.
Without fail, anytime I go online and ask questions or make criticisms of, for example, the content ID systems that exist on various social media platforms that completely trample our content, our intellectual property rights. I mean, especially if you're a producer and you're licensing beats, your copyrights get stepped on and thrown out, spat on, and the platforms don't care. There's no way for you to even, it's like whoever is the most aggressive at claiming ownership of something, even if they didn't create it, they're the winners. Is there anything that you've created via Formless, or is there any kind of hope? Because I always hear, without fail, blockchain will fix that. Web3 will fix that. And I'm just kind of like, how? Because you need buy-in from these mega platforms, and these mega platforms don't want decentralization. So is there anything that you can think of that could address this?
It's a good question. I don't think blockchain solves everything, right? I think that what you're talking about is a human problem. And then there's certain things that can be made more efficient with blockchain. But what you're talking about is still a fundamental agreement that needs to be honored by the Constitution or like the government whenever you talk about copyright law. So it doesn't matter what you put in a smart contract. If it deals with copyright law, you still need something that's like constitutionally honored. So at the very least, we need a better way to say, okay, who are the rights holders, and to have that like established somewhere that's a source of truth. Because right now, for me, with my album, and I don't know what your experience has been, but it's a bunch of DocuSigns, it's a bunch of chasing people around, it's trying to get everybody's, different BMI numbers and all that. It's just a pain, right? And every time I try to do a sync license or something, I got to go out and find everybody again. So it's a nightmare. I think that blockchain at the very least can make that more transparent and have all that stuff have a fundamental source of truth. And then the speed of the payments. So right now, if you're a producer and let's say you take, I don't know, I'll just give a hypothetical. Let's say you do 50% split with an artist. I mean, how long does it take you to actually make that money? Right? It takes a really long time because of the existing system. But with blockchain tech, it literally would be like money streaming. So every single time there's a transaction or every single time there's a payment, you just get the money in your wallet. You should have multiple income streams. That's what I think is the bright side. The downside is the problems you mentioned, I don't think get solved by that in terms of like automatic content ID and everything else. I think there's still a lot more work to do to innovate there.
So do you find this to be more focused on independent artists or hybrid artists? It seems that the label system is going to be consistent. They're going to go until they're forced out. And being forced out means they're just going to evolve, which is what they're doing. I know that they're making a move on the independent market share. So this to me seems like for somebody who has an established fan base and wants to generate more money from that, or who's willing to go through the process of building a new fan base and testing and experimenting. So I see it for that. But in your head, do you feel like this is widely accessible to everybody? Like, who is your target audience right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what you said is accurate, that labels are going to evolve. I never really thought, and this might be controversial, but I never thought labels were necessarily the worst part of the system. I still think somebody got to finance the music, and it makes sense for them to make money as a result of financing the music. I think that the deals could be more transparent. I think creators could have more control, and I think that smart contract technology allows that to happen. So what I envision is that labels evolve into just another address that's inside the smart contract, stamped by, whoever. Let's say Atlantic, right? Boom, that smart contract got that address in it. They put up some money up front. The smart contract automatically does the recoupment. They get their bread, and the artist gets whatever share they're supposed to get in perpetuity from there. So I think the concept of a label is cool. It's just the mechanics of how the label works. I think the technology is going to rapidly evolve. So with that said, the tech is really for everybody, and it just depends on how you want to use it. So like if you're a major label artist, it might be tougher for you to say, okay, I'm going to do a smart contract release this week, because you might be tied up in a bunch of contracts that you already have, and it might not be that easy. But you can actually monetize stuff that's not even a song. You can just go in the studio and record yourself previewing a song and put that on blockchain for 25 cents and make more money off that than you probably make off the single in the first week. So the idea is like everybody's going to use the tech in different ways, and we want to make the tech as flexible as possible, so that, okay, if you're in a label deal and you need to do recoupments, cool, we can do that at the microtransaction level in the contracts. If you don't want to put a song out, if you just want to do an in-studio preview, like the protocol is video friendly too. Or at, one of your examples, if you're an independent artist, you just want to experiment and do your whole release like this. Perfect. You can just upload, your single or your album or whatever you want to the blockchain. And also it could be bigger than music. So let's say you're just a creator in general, right? Like my stepfather teaches tennis. He put a tennis lesson on blockchain the other day, right? So the whole idea is that it's decentralized content distribution.
So what to you is your biggest challenge? Like, how do you, because I looked at your like you're not that active on socials. I would imagine like just educating, bringing awareness is one of the biggest challenges. But what currently can really help you push this idea and this technology forward?
That's a good question. So yeah, I used to be a lot more active on social, but just the algorithm and just over time, it's like you got to pick your battles. So I try to invest where I can, but not spend too much time. I think the main thing is, talking to more artists. That's why I was glad when you hit me up after the post. I was like, yeah, I would love to get in the room with more music people again. I've been so heavy on the tech side that now I want to get back to speaking, on the music side and the creative side, and just helping people to understand the value and trying it out. That's the other thing. Try it out. You know what I mean? And if we can help to help people get their mind wrapped around it, through trying it, that actually is what makes the product fire, because then you say, okay, I understand this, but I don't understand that, and we're going to make that better. So that's really the main thing is demonstrating that the market can understand this and then using that to get impact in the market.
I think something that, because people need to see it. It needs to be very tangible. So as many case studies are like just kind of walking through what exactly, let's just, take an artist, for example, to put the song out this way, just as many case studies as possible where it's very easy to see like what's happening. Because you got to hit people over the head probably a million times before it clicks, before like, okay, I get it. This is what the opportunity is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions, but when it comes, I guess, to this platform, I know another concern, especially when it comes to my artists, is getting paid in crypto. Even though it's the future, it's still very unstable. I know Ethereum is a little bit more stable, but it's like even the process of getting paid in crypto, transferring to my wallet, and then getting that to my bank account for artists is like, I don't even want to do this. You know what I'm saying? And I know it's a conversation. I see the value. As soon as you said decentralized content distribution, I was like, cool, I 100% get this. Because for my artists who have pushback, we can say, that's fine. We'll still push everything to your regular DSP. But now in studio stuff,
exactly,
live streaming from our concerts, any of that could be on the protocol and be easily monetized and add weight. And then by the time we do that a few times for a year or so, then they'll understand why their music is valuable. So that I love. I absolutely love, because I'm tired of them being like, to be honest, respect to TikTok and Instagram, YouTube is the only only platform that I'm really rocking with because they really pay. Everybody else we're bringing eyes to the platform and not getting compensated for it. So back to my original question, what's your answer when people start to talk about that? You may not move away from it, but I want to know what you're equipping people with that.
Yeah, so first off, your concern is 100% valid, especially right now with the whole FTX thing. Like, crypto is in a very bear market state. I think that the thing is the incentives have to align with the amount of work it takes. So if you're making money, people that I've talked to, it's cool to set up a crypto wallet and get paid in crypto because they're making money. If you're not making money, that's why the consumer side is like, why am I going to get a wallet to buy this thing, but I'm not making any money, right? So with crypto, for me, it's all about the incentives. If it's a way that you can make more money, then I think that justifies the extra work. And that's been my experience with creators. Like, if they feel like there's real impact, all right, there's no problem, set up the wallet. That being said, you still have the price fluctuations of being paid in crypto, which is a real thing. So we're planning to integrate stablecoin support. So there's a couple of different coins like USDC that retain value because they're pegged to the dollar. And that's a pretty easy thing to do at the technology layer. But for us, it's a little bit early to do that. So right now we do payments in Polygon and Ethereum, but stablecoin is on the roadmap.
Okay, last question, and then Payne, I'm gonna let you go, sorry. Team-wise, what does your team look like? Is it mostly developers? Do you have a proof of concept artist outside of yourself that you're courting, that you're like, hey, we want to move this over? Like, I think it was called, what is it? Ever something with an E that Lil Russell just did his project with. That was essentially their relaunch. People didn't get that, but they had a proof of concept artist bringing them over. Structurally, I'm wondering this because I'm a marketer. What is going to set you apart? I think, as Payne stated, a lot of these crypto guys, crypto bros, NFT guys are so heavily focused on the tech. They don't have the music translators or even a proof of concept outside of their sphere. So what is it that you feel like is going to be the attraction point? I know that logic seems logical to us on the business side, but artists feed off of clout. Even if the money makes more sense on your side, they still want a clouded human being to say, this is legit. What is your plan there to circumvent some of the artist mindsets?
Yeah, I mean, everything you just said is exactly what we talk about all day. So I'll answer the first part, which is the team piece. We have I say a blend of like creative and technology. So I definitely leverage my network. There's a couple of us from Google that are working with me on Formless on the tech side, and then on the music side, again, because I've been in music for the last 10, 12 years, I'm just leveraging relationships there as well. And I have it's been difficult for me to context switch and remember who I am as an artist when I've been so deep on like the being a founder and the technology stuff. But now, it's becoming business critical to get back into the mindset of an artist, right? And so that's what the most recent conversations have been since we've launched. Beta is exactly what you said. How do we go out? And we already have, multiple artist contracts signed to be a part of like that initial rollout that will probably kick off like top of the year. This year was mainly about getting the beta done. But I think at the end of the day, it has to be fire. Like you have to role model it and the example has to look crazy. If it doesn't, then the artist is like, eh. And that's the thing I think tech people don't really always understand is that it doesn't even matter what all the details are. You need an example that people look at and say, oh, I want it to feel like it felt like when they did it, right? And so that's really the thing right now is vision. It's vision painting. And that's like my job full time now is going out, talking to artists and also using my own creativity as a part of that. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be using the protocol too and just building up case studies, as you said.
I was going to follow that up by asking what some of your frustrations were coming from the artistry side, coming from the traditional music business side, entering into the tech space. I feel like this actually happened. We talk about NFTs and Web3, and oftentimes I feel like it's just being dictated to us, imposed onto us, and we're skeptical of that. So when we question it, I actually had I think it's just one sad, lonely person, but someone on Twitter created like 10 different accounts. And like anytime I would tweet anything, it would be like, oh yeah, but you don't fuck with NFTs, and like thinly veiled threats and like, we're the naysayer assassin. I'm like, all right, cool, come get me. But it was just, I understand that people are passionate, very passionate when it comes to Web3 because it's such an emerging technology and a misunderstood technology. But then there's this additional layer of misunderstanding when you're trying to give people something that they don't necessarily want at this point or don't know how they can use. So what are some of the frustrations you run into given that you have this duality of being the artist and the tech person?
Yeah, I mean, everything you just said resonates with me. One thing that we've learned is that there's, if you say creator or artist, it's like an oversimplification. There's a lot of different types of creators and artists. And so you'll see people that have had a lot of success with NFTs and Web3, but didn't really have a lot of success with streaming and kind of just like the music in general. And so those are two completely different groups of people. And so you might have one group that's like, this NFTs have changed my life. And you might have another group that's like, I don't really get it. And like in my neighborhood, people's not really using that. You know what I'm saying? So that's one piece is kind of knowing who we're speaking to in these different pockets. My frustration was the number one frustration for me was always communication as an artist. It was always you put in like so much work to create something beautiful, and then your prior thing did higher numbers than the next thing because the algorithm or something has changed underneath you as you're trying to grow. That was always the number one problem for me. It was just like the intermediation of our ability to just talk to the people that already love our work, right? I think also, though, for me, it was like learning how to value yourself as an artist. So, when you're first getting started as an artist, it takes a long time to just be able to make anything decent. Like it takes years or it takes time in the studio working with a lot of people. But eventually, like people do get the hang of it, right? Like a lot of people are able to, at some point, become pretty dope if they put the time in and they're committed. Now, if you're not aware of that, then once you hit that moment of like, okay, I'm coming into my own as an artist, then you'll put something out and you might measure it incorrectly because it is dope, but the numbers may not be what you want it to be, or you're comparing yourself to somebody else. And if you don't understand how to value yourself, you won't see the timeline of how things are supposed to grow on a curve, right? And so for me, that hit me a lot where it was like, I would do something and get 100,000 streams on SoundCloud and be disappointed because it wasn't 500,000 instead of thinking about how do I build on this 100,000, right? And so that's why I think it's two things. There's one, how do we communicate with the audience? And then two, how do we how do we exchange value within that? Because if I have 100 people that really love my stuff, or 1,000 people that really love my stuff, and then I can do things like peer-to-peer distribution and monetize on the first day to cover my expenses for other things I'm trying to create, and then make it more accessible later, it just changes the whole game. We have to be able to set our own value and be able to communicate with the audience. Those were the two things that was the biggest piece for me. Selling NFTs, I think it is dope because there are certain people that have, that works for them, but that wasn't the headline for me. It was much more like, okay, we can do peer-to-peer distribution. We can go back to the days of, when we just sold mixtapes and CDs out of the trunk, but we can do it with more sophisticated technology.
Is there an artist that has already used the platform that would speak openly about their experience that can kind of walk us through, like, do we have that yet? Or maybe it's a later conversation so that,
We do have early case studies from some of our like beta testers and early adopters. So yeah, I think at this point, the main thing is getting it past the point of like those early case studies to now going out and making it about the actual experience. You know what I mean?
Right.
What is the actual song? What is the actual video? What is the actual piece that we're using? But we do have, like on Twitter Space, we did our last Twitter Space. There was 400 people in there, just talking to the protocol and a lot of the early users and stuff. And for me, you can't really build a good product unless you already have the people that's going to be using it in the conversation while you're building it. So that being said, though, I would say a lot of the people that are in our kind of core group right now are a little bit more Web3 native. They're a little bit more like, okay, we're willing to experiment with this. We're willing to kind of get through the hurdles. And what we're trying to do now is take those learnings, but then bridge the gap with artists who may not be as familiar with Web3.
Right.
So even with, artists who aren't familiar with Web3. Okay, so take me as a producer and then some of the artists I've worked with, for example, actually, or just anyone in general. It sounds to me like your platform and just Web3 in general and the people who have had success in Web3 in general possess the same basic qualities and the same kind of vision as an artist that succeeded in any era, whether it's selling beats hand to hand, mixtapes out the trunk, getting signed, existing in Web 2. And it sounds like the common denominator between all these artists is one, taking risks, two, doing something different, and three, building and maintaining community.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess, like, is that part of the communication element of all of this? Because it does feel to me like when these conversations come up that, and this isn't something exclusive to Web3, but now that Web3 is hot, that's what I'm seeing. You bring something up about how you're frustrated with the traditional music industry, right? Or like, I'll say, selling beats online creates these problems, like the content ID problem we discussed. And then someone comes in and goes, switch to Web3, your life is going to be way easier. And I'm like, it's not going to be easier. It's going to be the same challenges because this is all transferable skills. It's like, I think when Web3 started emerging, we thought it was this entirely different universe. Really, it's just people, who could be fans of your music, who couldn't be fans of your music, who could be consumers, who could not be consumers, right? So
I mean, the only thing I would say is that I agree with you. The statement like "come over to Web3 is going to fix everything." I'm pretty against that concept because Web3 is a very broad thing. I mean, it's not. Why does it keep calling me? It's not like it's not a magic bullet, right? Like Web3 contains a bunch of different possibilities. That being said, there are some possibilities within Web3 that are revolutionary, that were not possible in history. And so what I mean by that is when we talk about like selling out the trunk or selling mixtapes and all that, the key there was that you control the supply and you control the price. That is gone, right? And so Web3 is the first technology that has come up that allows you to do that in a digital way. And that's the part that I consider to be revolutionary. Now, if you were to say, well, I can do that because I can, as I said, I can just put 100 copies on my website and just shut it down after those sell out. That's cool, but that means people have to listen to it on your website or they have to download it and put it in iTunes. And that's just not the way people consume music. So because you get the ability to have that price control and that supply and demand on a protocol layer, but still be able to have the thing light up in applications that people already use. That's really the mind bender that's like, okay, this is very, very different. But to your point, apart from us, to be honest, I haven't seen anybody do that. So that's why a lot of people are looking at it like, well, I mean, now I just got to go sell NFTs. What's the difference between that and selling t-shirts? I mean, I just got to go sell.
Yep.
You know, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that's the missing element. I think the for me personally, a lot of this stuff I read, I'm like, even the description on your website, I'm like, this sounds amazing. I don't understand a damn word. But when you actually speak on it, because it's more like artist to artist, when what's the young woman's name that we had on? Latasha. Damn, how did I forget that? Yeah. When she spoke on it, it was like, yeah, that makes total sense. Because she's an artist, and it's like we all speak the same language anyway. I think, you know, a lot of it is transmuted into the tech world elevator pitch style language, and then I'm like, that's not my. I mean,
it's like look think about email before email existed. If somebody tried to explain you email and you had never done it and was just like, all right, so we're gonna have like 60 servers. There's going to be one at MIT, one at UC Berkeley. There's going to be one in Wisconsin, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to route bytes between the servers, and then somehow we're going to use that so that, you know, I can give you a message. You'll be like, oh, I just use the phone. Why would I bother with all? I don't know what you're talking about. It's too complicated, right? But then when you receive your first email and you send your first email, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And I think we haven't gotten there yet with this story. But once people start to do that and they see like, okay, you really need an example. I mean, that's just the best way for people to learn. And so for
streaming didn't make sense. I don't think that.
Exactly.
So, well, I know we're coming up almost on the hour. I don't know if you guys have any more questions or if we could wrap this up. I knew this conversation would be insightful, and it definitely proved to be just that. Brandon, as you guys progress, have success, feel free to hit me up and we can have, you know, another conversation to bring people up to speed on what's happening or what has happened. And like I said, all the success stories, because I think you have something here. From the first time I heard you talk, I knew you were a smart cat. And it was a different story being told than what everybody else was doing. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. He might have something. And I think that's why I'm not sure if anything ever came of the conversation with Jackson, but I was like, all right, let me help any way I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to hit me up anytime if you have anything that you want us to help amplify or educate, you know, our community. However we could be of help, man, we'll definitely try to.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Where do you see this in 5 years?
5 years, I see this being the primary way that content is consumed on the internet. I think everything's going to move toward microtransactions. I don't think that subscriptions scale. I don't think people can subscribe to 100 different creators at $5 each on Patreon. I don't think that makes sense. I think it's going to be microtransactional. I think creators are going to set the price. And I think the platforms are going to ultimately pull content from a protocol layer where creators are in control. I think that's what it's going to look like in 5 years. And all it takes is for artists to start valuing ourselves that way and recognizing that we actually do have the leverage in this scenario.
Damn, I got a million more questions. I'm gonna withhold them.
I can come back on anytime.
The lingering question I think is like, you know, with this emerging, you know, accepting your premise that in 5 years this is all going to be, you know, far more decentralized. How are the labels going to?
They're in it. The label, I don't think the label's our problem. To me, the label just becomes the money fronter, right? It's like the bank. We'll put the money up, and then we also take a recoupment at the contract layer.
Okay, so it'll just be included in the deals the same way that everything else is now, you know, retrofit into whatever.
Exactly, but with transparency.
Because you still need, I mean, labels, I'm with you, Brand. Like, I still think labels are relevant, like, especially probably now a lot more than it has been in the past few years because of how much music's being created. You know, you need help or support to kind of amplify yourself or, you know, stick out from all the, you know, all the music that's being created. So
but there's this paradox, Dame, like where you said it yourself, the labels don't know how to navigate this technology. Now, we talked about it with TikTok, where a lot of labels were frustrated with the TikTok algorithm. And I'm like, that's their child, though. I mean, the labels created that monster, and now they can't control it. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I'd love to extend it if that's possible. But Brandon already said
I'll come back. I'll come back anytime.
okay. I love just like backing guests into the wall and verbally agreeing to come back. All right, appreciate you. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to the MEC podcast. We are here every single Monday, but you don't have to consume it on Monday. You can do it whenever you want, and maybe at some point we'll interface our podcast with the technology.
You should drop this on share.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yo, I was gonna hit them after we got off. Like, yo, we need to put all the old episodes on share. Like this, I'm with you.
Yeah. I'll send you guys to Twitch. I did a live stream demo on Twitch, and maybe that'll give you a better understanding of how it works, so you can see me actually walk through the product.
No.
All right, this could be the future of MEC podcast. Well, we appreciate you. Thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Thank you. Peace.